Good evening to everybody. It's certainly good to see you all tonight. Also, the live streaming tonight for Benoni and also Youth of Jesus Christ. Chris Burke will be bringing the lesson to us tonight on new life behavior. So we're looking forward to that. Just a few announcements. Please continue to keep Peter Smith in your prayers. I believe he is back in at the moment as well. And then reminder for the Benoni congregation on Saturday morning at 8 o'clock is to be the vaping display or course. And then at 12:30 is to be the Benoni Jesus Christ teachers. We'll be getting together for a meeting in the resource room. We're looking at some material and talking about the material. So welcome to you all, and look forward to your lesson tonight. Tom, do you want to lead us in the opening prayer? And then we'll start.
Shall we bow our heads? Father, we just thank you for the blessing of congregating together in your name. You're a wonderful God. You love us so incredibly. We live in a world, Father, that day by day we see is certainly not following you, Father. And we pray that we'll be focused and we'll understand and we'll have compassion to those who are around us. Father, we thank you for Chris, for the time he spent preparing, and we thank you for the new life behaviour and the prison ministries, Father. It's such a blessing, it really is, to those who are incarcerated and need to know your truth, Father. And we thank you for the volunteers and those who support this programme, and we just thank you that we'll be educated and edified this evening. In Jesus' name, amen.
Brother Burke here tonight, because he is the one who introduced the New Life Behaviour Program to South Africa more than 20 years ago. And I have fond memories of some of those early days I was spent travelling with him and spreading this. It's developed, or was developed by Dr. Henry Mossinger in the USA, with the idea of it being used in prisons and correctional services. But it wasn't developed specifically for those who were incarcerated. It was developed with everybody in mind. It has primarily been used in South Africa for those who are in prison, and the inmates have been taught this for a long period of time. But more recently we decided that it was a good idea to introduce it more broadly into the community, and the reason for that is on the basis of Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2, which talks about, it's very familiar, and there's some people who really like these two verses out there in the congregation. So you hear it often, it's the idea of being transformed. That do not be conformed to this world, verse 2, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And you'll be able to prove what is good, is acceptable, and perfect, as far as the will of God is concerned. So, what is this? It's a transformational idea, or transformational program, curriculum, to help us do what is the most difficult. That's to change our behavior. Get very set in our ways very early in life. And this is a way, when we become Christians, to have what is the biblically oriented program that has some practical applications to get involved in the transformation. So New Life Behaviour has a butterfly as its symbol, as you can maybe see up there. You can see it up there. On the second page, I think, of that. But it's got a butterfly, and that's the word that's used. The word metamorphosis is used in Romans 12:2 with regard to transformation. Changing your life. And that's what we attempt to do with New Life Behaviours, to get lives changed. And the life that you want to change most is your own. That's the idea behind it. There are a lot of different courses, and I'm going to go through one which I think is nicely represented. Last week, unfortunately, with the load shedding, signal went down completely and nobody got the message outside the congregation. This week hopefully we'll get more of a spread. But there are a lot of different lessons, a lot of different courses in New Life Behavior that impact different areas of our lives. And the first one, which we take in this one and the previous one from, is course 1, which is a sense of self. Who are we? What do we like? It has lessons like, who am I? I am of great value, a new question, a new life. And then you've got things like a sense of family, the Christian man, lifting up the family. You've got parenting matters. How many of us would have liked that when we were younger, I wonder? And how many people would like that now? It would be very useful. And you've got Christian marriage skills. How about that? Get some marriage skills. So there are a lot of different courses that you can have. There's ones on attitudes and behaviors. There's one on substance abuse and other topics as well. So really worthwhile. There are a lot of them and you can use them as you see fit. And the idea really is that it's used within a congregation first of all. So perhaps get together with a few members of the congregation, maybe 4 people or 6 people, and actually go through it and approach it in a particular way. Then you can gain confidence in the actual course. Get to the point where you want to share it with somebody outside who you think it would be beneficial. So there's an evangelistic motive behind it as well. It's not just about changing lives, because of course we want to bring people to Christ. That's our objective as Christians, to bring people to Christ. And so we want to do that. And this is a tool in order to do that. And if you go through it yourself and gain confidence in it, then you can take it out to others and use it with them, with their confidence, knowing then that you can use it effectively. So start within the congregation and perhaps take it outside to others. It might be that there's people that you know that would like to go through the marriage part of it as well. The big thing is you don't have to be the expert. You're not a marriage counselor. You don't have to advise people how to run their marriages. You just go through the program and see it and apply it and then work from that standpoint. So that's the idea with regard to New Life Behavior. It's also approached in a particular way, in a very positive way. And so when you've got a group together, the idea is you don't start out with all the negatives of life, which is what we often do when we meet people. And we might have even done that tonight when we greeted somebody. We might have said, oh, we didn't have any load shedding tonight, but it's coming. But you could rephrase it differently, perhaps. You could say, isn't it wonderful that we don't have load shedding tonight? It's fantastic. All right, so the lights are not going to go off. We hope. But so start with something positive. The idea is that you share something positive, perhaps something positive that's occurred in your life. One thing that's positive that occurred in my life this past week was that we're listening to the lesson that was delivered on Saturday night by Morgan. I thought, there's a time I probably offended him when he went over time. He preached till after 7. And I really didn't know this was just not acceptable. So from my standpoint. And I thought, that was a long time ago. But it comes up every now and again, and maybe he's offended by that. And I'm just overruling it. So I apologized to him, and he accepted the apology, so maybe I thought it was true on that. And so if that was the case, then maybe the relationship has been restored. It wasn't quite as it should be. So that's a good thing. And all it took was an apology for me. So that's something good that happened in my life this past week, on Sunday evening after the lesson. There I've shared something good that has happened with you. And that's the idea with New Life Behavior. When you get together, share something good. That's one of the things. One of the other things is actually greet people. And look at them when you greet them. And, shake their hands or hug them. We're allowed to hug them. We're allowed to hug them. Or not really. Right. Something like that. So have that personal contact with the people that you're with and greet them. So you create a good environment. Greet them by name if you can remember the name. Right? So Sometimes when you get older, you don't always remember names. I excuse the fact that I sometimes get names wrong, because that I would call my daughters by different names. How many of you have done that? Yeah.
I was consistent. I got them both probably the same time.
Both probably at the same time. Okay, well, that's to me that would be normal. So, my middle daughter, that was the one, all the three daughters, the middle daughter, that was just unacceptable. I got her name wrong. So, that's okay, because my father did it too, and he could run through about 4 or 5 names before he got to mine. So, I was wondering about those others that I didn't recognize. But in any case, that's one of the things you do, try and read people by name. That's the idea behind it. And then, the way this is designed is that before you start a lesson, you actually give the lesson to the participants in the class. Now, it hasn't happened like this in this presentation, so you all don't have a copy of it. But ideally, that could have occurred. Then you had a week to look at what was going to be presented tonight, so you were familiar with it. And the idea is you read through it in one go, without looking at the scriptures first. And then you go a second time and look at all the scriptures, so that you start to really absorb the material and get the material. You do that during the week. But there's something you do before all of that, right? Brother Louis, there's something you do before that. And that is, on the front one, where it says, lesson 4, why did I do that? This is a really nice one, and I chose it in particular because it's typical. There are many things in life that we do, and we think, why on earth did I do that? Or say that. Have you ever said something, and as soon as those words are out of your mouth, you thought, it's like, come back. Too late, they're out. So, we recommend we just take it up a little bit. Just take it up a little bit. Before you start. That's the next one. Before you start. The response sheet. Before you even read through it, you answer a question. In this case, the question that's there is, I am in my current position and condition because I did or did not do. So, this is one very much where you're examining your life. And you're figuring out, okay, if I'm in a bad position in life, I'm in a bad position because I did or did not. Because the normal behavior of people is that you're in a bad position because somebody else did. But anyway, the idea is before you start, you say why you are in the position you're in life, or where you are in life. If you're unsatisfied with life, you might put down something that's negative about other people. That's very likely because people do that kind of thing a lot. And that's before you even read the lesson. And then you can go right to the end of the lesson. It's actually on the last page of the lesson. When you've gone through the lesson and you've had the class, then you have a reflection. And the reflection is, now that you've finished the lesson, write a few sentences. That's the one. Telling what new things you have learned about your present situation or condition and how you can use these new ideas. And so there should be something that's learned from the material that will help you adjust the way you think about your life. And then there's an application of this, which is the final thing, and part of the whole idea as well. So if you have a class like this, you work through the program, you apply those principles, the positive atmosphere, the friendly greeting, the going through the lesson beforehand, before you get through the lesson, putting down what you think, and then afterwards, putting what you think, that might be different. And then finally applying the lesson is the last thing that you do, that you list one or more ideas in the lesson that you want to use to change your behavior. Because the idea is we always want to behave better than we have in the past, right? Well, for most of us, that's what we want. Because we recognize we don't always behave the way that we should. And so the idea is transformational behavior. What do I do what principles do I use in order to adjust my behavior? Because the thing is with changing behavior is it's not good enough just to say to yourself, I'll try harder. Okay. Because generally speaking, we get into that zone where we're into the end of the year, people make New Year resolutions, right? And then they make a resolution, and on the 2nd of January they break it. You know, very often it's like, I'm going to watch what I eat now, that I've just abused our body for a whole month and just stuff all this food down my throat. And so I'm going to behave myself when I'm eating, and on the 2nd there's leftovers. You can't resist it. So you break it on the 2nd, and then you don't go back on the 3rd and say, well, I broke it on the 2nd, but I'm going to keep on trying. And normally it's like, oh, it's the use of resolutions anyway. So it is very difficult to change your behavior unless you've got principles that you can apply to do it. Because trying harder doesn't really work for most people. It doesn't work. You've got to have things that you do specifically in order to adjust your behavior. That's the idea behind this. Why did I do this? Or why did I do that? More specifically, as it says. And so you then start to go through the lesson. And what it does is it uses biblical examples of people who did what they did. So in the introduction, you'll notice it's got a few introductory ideas there. On the Unit 2, Understanding Our Behavior, Lesson 4, why did I do that? So, yeah, that page. And first of all, it has this the box that says, discovering the basis of one's behavior is step 1 in growing as a mature Christian. Why did I do that? Why do I behave the way that I do? Is the idea that people need to figure out as Christians in order to effect change. And one of the ideas is there in Proverbs 23, verse 7, which is often thought as the heart of this type of program. For as he thinks in his heart, so is he. In Proverbs, that has to do with eating. And somebody offering you food, he doesn't really want to offer you food. so tend to watch out for such people. Because as he thinks in his heart, so is he. Might be an offering that he doesn't really want you to take. So he won't be too generous. All right, so as he thinks in his heart, so is he. As we think in our heart, we practice what our hearts are telling us to do, is the idea there. So, it does mention in the introduction here the different worldviews that we went through last week about, atheist, agnostic, or Christian. And of course, what we realized last week is that nobody lives from an atheistic viewpoint. It would just be too destructive to the individual and everybody around him. So nobody lives like that. So that should already give an idea that maybe that's not a realistic worldview. And that the Christian worldview gives you the most love, hope, etc. And so it talks about why did I do that? And the first one is, why did Adam and Eve disobey God? Or Nadab and Abihu who were killed by God. He destroyed them with fire because they offered an authorized fire before the Lord. Or why did Moses strike the rock instead of speaking to it? Why did Peter later change the behavior why Judas committed suicide? Because they both betrayed Jesus, didn't they? In their different ways. Why did one commit suicide and then the other one repented of his actions? Why is that the case? That probably has puzzled people for centuries. So why do we act the way we do? And it's the idea from Proverbs 23:7, as he thinks in his heart. So for example, Adam and Eve sinned. And what did Adam do? Who did Adam blame? Yeah, he blamed Eve, but he also blamed God. Right? He didn't say, yeah, she did. He says, the woman who you gave me. So in a sense, it's God's fault. Not just the woman's fault, but it's God's fault. So in the relationship, because those are the key relationships he had, those are the only relationships he had, right? God, Eve, and himself. And so who is he here to blame? Well, everybody evidently but himself. That's very typical human behavior. How many people say when they get angry, you made me angry? Okay. You did. You're responsible for my anger. You made me do it. All right, the devil made me do it. And then you've got, some say a little voice made me do it. I don't think a little voice has ever made me do anything. Maybe there are some people who have that little voice in their heads. It's just a pity. I hope that's not one of your one that you know. Okay, good. All right. So then you have King David, the sin with Bathsheba. That is something really different, isn't it? Because Nathan came to the prophet in 2 Samuel chapter 12, verse 7, and went through this whole story about the lamb and the man who had many taking the only lamb of this other man. And David's outraged and says that man should die. And Nathan, who is he? Bring him to you. Nathan says, you're the one. Okay. The interesting thing about David is he did something that just most human beings will not do. He said, I have sinned against God. He took responsibility. Now that's the right reaction to our sin. It's not to blame other people, not to blame our circumstances, not to blame anything else, but to take responsibility ourselves for what we do. We are still responsible for how we react to the situations we find ourselves in. And if we react badly, that's on us, not anybody else. So that's the idea behind this. This first page is putting that into perspective, is that you see these different reactions in Scripture, right from the very beginning of creating man, of people behaving as they should. So people will blame different things. I remember giving a lift to somebody, and he said, well, he lost his car because he was drunk and he did a U-turn and destroyed the other car in the south. He ended up in hospital, without people in the hospital. He's giving me this, and I'm nodding and saying, okay, so you learned your lesson. I said, no, you can't take these things too seriously. Stop. Get out. That's the appropriate response, isn't it? For something like that. Maybe if you walk a little bit further, change your view. Some say they don't know why they were doing it. They don't know responsibility whatsoever. I don't know. Why did you do that? I don't know. You get that as well quite often. Some blame their parents. A lot of people blame their parents for their actions. And Peter and Judas blamed themselves, but one repenting, one killed. One was an appropriate response. One was a very destructive response. So, when you look at this, an atheist will basically say, well, I'm just following my biological urges. If he's consistent with his faith, if I could put it that way, black, my biological social needs and urges, I'm just human. I'm just reacting the way I'm designed. So that would be consistent. I don't know that people will do that. An agnostic says, I don't know why I did it, or they made me do it, or I was afraid they would not like me. It hasn't got any firm basis for living, no firm basis for living. But the Christian response is like David, is to take responsibility. So that's the idea there. So what influences our behavior? Right? There's basically different things that influence our behavior. And one of them, believe it or not, is our genes. Okay, so, genes there. The genetic structure. The truth is we inherit a lot of things from our parents. Most often not money, but there's a lot of other things that we inherit from our parents. And, what we inherit from our parents is what? Well, some of it is looks. And you might have your kids say, oh, I wish I had mom's nose, or, whatever, instead of yours, or anything like that. But we also inherit behavior patterns, and even twins who've been separated are remarkably alike in the way they behave, even being separated. So that tells you that it's not just learned behavior, that it is part of who we are, our temperament, and also some of the ways that we relate. Our temperament is what we pretty much born with. We're born with different temperaments. And it's healthy to express our lives within our temperament and not try to be a different temperament. But we inherit a lot of different things from our parents, much more than we would like to admit. There's an uncle that I have, I always used to laugh at my uncle because of the way he behaved. The older I got, the more I realized I'm more like him than anybody else. So, in my family, so I behaved more like him, and I used to laugh at his behavior, so what does that say about me? So that's one of the things that does influence us, and we need to recognize it. And if you're very observant of your parents, you can often see the correlation and connection with it. So it's not just the physical characteristics, not the type of voice or the hair or whatever the other things are. That does have an impact on the way that we behave. And we learn to moderate or adjust behavior according to our temperament, don't we? We learn that there's times where you can't just, if you're an absolute extrovert, that there are certain times where you have to rein that in a little bit, especially if you're living with other people. And, for example, you're living with an introvert, or you might be in a situation as I was as a Bible college student, living with 4 other men in a fairly confined space. And one of them, first thing in the morning, he just wanted to explode with the joys of life. And others around him was like, they just want to ease him slowly into the day. So that created some conflict because there was just too much joy. Actually, a lot of times when people feel like that's just too much joy, they never have a coffee first before I interact. So we learn to modify our behavior according to our natural behavior, according to circumstances, don't we? So that's the idea there. And that brings the next influence on behavior is a group. The group that we're naturally one of the major groups in our families, and that influences our behaviors a great deal. But it's also our peers, our friends, our teachers, our society, the church. All of these things have an influence. The groups that we're involved with influence our behavior, sometimes positively, sometimes very negatively. And sometimes we think we're sending our kids to school and they just learn math, right? But then they might be learning a lot of other things from their teacher that we don't want them to learn, but the teacher's intentionally communicating with them. So we have to keep things like that in mind. But the groups influence our behaviors. How much were you influenced by your school teachers? Any of you had a school teacher that school teacher changed my life? No? Okay, you're probably very fortunate that is the case. My mother was very musical, and she taught people how to play instruments at school, and several of them became professional musicians. So that was perhaps a positive influence. All right, but the groups that we're involved in influence our behavior. The church should actually influence our behavior, right? In a positive way. So that's the idea, is that you start to realize, okay, what is influencing me? I've got a certain makeup. This is what I am like. And I can't be something else, but I have to modify that behavior in order to be socially accepted to some extent. Right? You learn that as we go. Then you've got what you would call the guidelines, and this is a set of values, and this especially when the church is very important, and it's very important for your kids, and it's good for kids to sit in, even when they're a little bit younger and not that enthusiastic about having to listen to a sermon or a Bible study. If they don't have their own class and they've got to sit in on a Bible study, it's good to encourage them to sit in there and hear those principles on a weekly basis and not let them go out and play outside. Because especially if you allow them to do that when they're, say, 8, 9, 10, 11, and you let them go and play outside, you think you're going to get them back in here when they're teenagers, really? Okay? You've already lost them at that age. And the chance of you losing your children's faith is very high. Because you haven't placed any value on what's in this. The values that are taught here are extremely important. And so, yeah, it does take a bit of discipline. And people discipline the kids in different ways. But, you might be the one who drags the child out screaming, "No, Daddy, no, Daddy." And the snack or something like that. You might not be allowed to do that today, so just keep that in mind. But we've seen that a lot over the years. Chris, haven't you? Parents drag no daddies the silence. Mostly. Certainly. Guidelines, values that are imparted. Those influence us tremendously, whether we realize it or not. And then goals, the goals that people set. And the interesting thing about goals is your goal might be a terrible goal. And in other words, for a lot of very young people, their goal is just to have fun. Right? That's still a goal, but it might be one that is very harmful to that teenager. Because that having fun might entail things like getting drunk or taking drugs or doing very dangerous things, behaviors that are very destructive. So your goals, what you decide what you figure out about your life and what you want to do with it, and especially when you get to teens and getting past teens and adult life, and a lot of people when they leave school have no clue what they need to do, right? They might go to university and they start studying, and it's like, I hate this. Or you can get a degree, you never use that degree because they absolutely hate it. They've been through 4 years, don't know what they want to do. So try to figure out who you are. Probably best for you to try and help your kids by figuring out yourself what your kids are good at and guiding them in that direction, if you can. That's probably a good thing to do. But goals are very important, and we have certain goals. Whether they are very loosely defined and destructive or very positive. So all of these things influence us. When we talk about why did I do that, these are things that influence us. And then it's how our mind works. There's 3 basic things that are very important in how we function as human beings. And one of them is the thinking, what goes on inside here. That has to do with knowing, remembering, perceiving, analyzing, evaluating, understanding, the thinking aspect to it. Sometimes, if you ask people, what are you thinking? They'll say, nothing. Sometimes that might be true. I can't imagine it's a person, but but thinking is a very important part of who you are, generally speaking. So the other one is feeling. And always, there's a statement made by an historian that I really like to read. And he says that it's a depressing conclusion for an historian not to reach that reason plays very little part in human affairs. That's a pretty scary concept. But a lot of what we do revolves around how we feel, and how people make us feel, and how we feel about ourselves. That's a huge part. And includes things like love, fear, resentment, anger, compassion, a whole range of human emotions. And if you think of yourself in primarily negative terms, it's also very harmful for you. If you think like that, if everything about you is bad, and how God thinks about you, you're a bad person, and that everybody hates you. That, as the saying goes, he doesn't have any friends, he just knows people. Right? That's that idea. We joke about it, but sometimes that's true, because people can get into that frame of thinking where they reject people around them. So, all right. Then there's behavior, action, what we do. All right. And all of these things, what comes first? Okay? What comes first? The chicken or the egg? Kind of, with thinking, feeling, and action. Well, the reality is that yes, head, heart, hands. Who's pointing out to me? It's the idea of, and the expression, it's a very good expression, that you've got head, heart, hands. The head, the thinking, the heart, the feeling, and the hands, the action. And the truth is, any one of those will affect the others. Any one of those things will affect all the others. And so if we recognize this is a very valuable tool for changing behavior, because very often we'll do something bad, and that will affect the way that we feel and the way that we think, and it puts us in a bad space. And so how do you change that? You change that by recognizing you're in a bad space and doing something about it. And so that's the first one. Let's take thinking first. That you're thinking. And the example that's given here is the thinking of, in Luke 15, verse 17, about the prodigal son. He got to a point where he looked at the circumstances and he thought, I don't need to be in. This is really bad circumstances. And I've put myself in a situation. I've been much better as a servant in my father's house than right here. He thought it through. That was the first thing he did. And then he had this feeling. What is the feeling? The feeling is, I'm not worthy to be a son. That's what he expressed, He recognized he was not worthy. That's that repentance of it. The recognition of where you are. The fact that you don't have to stay there. That the feeling is of regret, and then the action comes from that. He goes back home and goes before his father. So the thinking resulted in the feeling, which resulted in an action, but it started with the thinking. So thinking can sometimes come first, and that's the example that's given: the realization, the humility, the going home, and then the consequence of that is salvation. And then there's the feelings first idea. And the example is in James, talking about lust. The lust is feeling, whether it's lust, sexual lust, or it's inappropriate lust for the things of this life, or things that belong to other people. The lust of the eye, the lust of the flesh, and the pride of life, as 1 John 2:6 causes. That's often where the bad action starts, because the lust causes the planning, because you want what you shouldn't have, and then the thinking gets involved, the planning, and then the action. So that's an example of that one. And then you've got behavior first. And the example given here is Paul's behavior. That Paul was on the road to Damascus. And then he had this experience with Jesus. And he had 3 days to think about that, right? That impact on it. And then the action was as a result of what was said to Ananias and Paul. And God told Ananias, don't worry, he's going to suffer a lot for my name. And then I was just saying, this guy's caused much suffering. Potential Christians, and God saying, don't worry, he's going to suffer a lot for my name. Get up and be baptized and wash away sins according to the name of the Lord. So there is action that we can take that can change our situation. So there's behavior, the feelings, and the thinking. I went right back to behavior. The soft behavior is feelings, the regret, and the 3 days to contemplate the changes that he's going to make in his life. So there's this constant interchange between all of these things. And a lot of time, if somebody doesn't do what they're supposed to do, they feel bad about it. And so you might, as a student, you haven't done your assignment, you feel bad about it, so you go lie down in your bed and contemplate, the fact that you haven't done it and you're going to be in trouble tomorrow and it's too late to do something. Through that whole process. Whereas what should you do? You should then get up off that bed and then go ahead and do what you're supposed to do and make you feel better. So the action is to get up and do it as a result of your feeling, and then it's what you're thinking of, and then you'll feel better. You'll feel better. So that's an example of that. So when we realize that any one of these things can affect the others, and that if you're feeling bad about something, there is something that you can do to change the way that you're feeling. And so think about it. What should I do to change this space where I am right now, which is making me miserable? And then take that action. Because it's amazing how small actions can change the way that you feel about yourself and change your thinking. So any one of these, by doing any one of these three and allowing it to positively impact it can positively impact the other two. So not any one of these comes first. Any one of these can influence the others positively. So that helps you to know, why did I do that? That's the idea behind it. All right. So in summary, this goes from all of that to a summary. And the idea is, as is a statement here, the art of being wise is the art of knowing what to do. By constantly considering, thinking our response to a given situation or stimulus, we can change our responses to temptations. That is great news. We are in charge of our actions. So it's almost like you've got to think about it. If you want to change a set of behaviors, you've got to contemplate, okay, how do I respond to things like triggers? Certain things trigger you, right? And it was like that with my parents. My dad would know how to aggravate my mother, and she would always respond in the same way. And I would say to her, why do you allow him to trap you in the same way? Because it's not anything different. He's doing the same thing he's always done. Okay, so, but we all do that, right? There's certain things that people do that the modern word is we get triggered, right? Triggers a response. And so you've got to figure out, okay, I'm going to respond like that. So think about it. Think, how could I respond differently? When that happens, how can I respond differently? Because very often our reactions are automatic, right? We don't think about it because it's ingrained. And so you automatically respond in certain ways. Don't think about it. It's just an automatic response. And so you can say to yourself, I'm not going to respond like that. That actually is not good enough, because that's not going to do the job. You've got to say, okay, if that happens, then what am I going to do? So if you've got an initially angry response, you might say, okay, if somebody says something like that, I'm going to just say something nice. Okay, which the scriptures indicates is like heaping coals of fire on somebody's head. So if somebody says something negative, you normally get angry with them, and you respond by, complimenting them in some way, about the way that they dress, or something that they've done. And by doing something like that, you're adjusting your response, which also affects your emotions as well. So you might even, if you have to apologize to somebody, which I have to sometimes do on Sunday, then I will also, Brother Morgan, I apologize. I don't just say I apologize. Sorry. I apologized profusely. How does it make me feel? You know, it makes me feel good. I just apologized. I've apologized profusely. Exaggerated gestures, but it helps me. It's not, doesn't add authenticity. It just helps my natural responses. So I was very happy to do it, by the way. So that's the idea about it. You need to figure out how you can change what is an automatic response to people in some way or another. And then when you're ready when it comes to it's like opportunity. And hopefully you'll be able to switch off the trigger before it happens. Put the safety catch on before you pull the trigger. That's the way I should express it. So that's the idea behind this. Each one affects the other. It's head, heart, hands. That when you change one, you can change the other. What you have at the end of these is discussion questions as well. So one of them is, why do you think Peter repented and Judas committed suicide? Why do you think that? Anybody got an idea? Why did Judas not repent like Peter? Wouldn't we have liked him to do that? Wouldn't that have been better for him? So why didn't he? You think it's his character? Okay. All right. Do you think he'd gone too far? But he sort of did, he threw the money in the temple. Yeah, it's true. And so even though he realized that the consequences were bigger than he intended, yeah.
It must have been levels of guilt. Like Peter was able to overcome his guilt and Judas wasn't.
Yes.
So I'm assuming him, but he was like, I can't.
Okay. He got trapped in his guilt. Approximately the idea, trapped in his guilt. Tom, you've got much less sympathy for him. No sympathy for him. And the interesting thing with Judas, a lot of modern people have sympathy for him. And yet he acted purely out of greed. The motive wasn't good. And it was just greed. And maybe when you do things out of greed, ultimately they don't really satisfy, do they? And so there was no satisfaction, but he didn't know any other way, because that's the way he developed himself. So, yeah. Yeah. Yes, he was a thief. Yeah, and the scripture makes that clear, doesn't it? Yeah. Yes. So, all right. So we won't have any sympathy there for sin, right? There's other questions that are there. The difference between atheist and agnostic. I mentioned that twice this week and last week. So, which of the four do you think has most influence on our behavior? Do you think any one of these influences your behavior more than another? Or are they pretty equally weighed? I gave you a historical quote that seems to indicate that people think that your emotions have more control of your behavior. Often people do things and then they figure out a reason, deductive approach why they did it. But it was out of just pure emotional, purely emotional response. I think all four of those things are influenced. So you think an extrovert is more likely to listen? Yes. And after you're talking to a man and a woman, you could very well be. All right. So go through it. See if it works for you first, right? If it works for you, then you can use it with others. Because it has to work for you first. You have the confidence to work with others. But it is exactly that. It's got biblical ideas and just practical ways of applying it. And that's the idea behind divine behavior. That's transformation. That's it for tonight.